Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka Uberbear, and today I'm joined by our, how did you describe yourself, the green goblin that pops out of nowhere?
I don't think I've described myself like that. But today I am the sick little fae that's on this podcast.
What about, if we just redefine this entirely, because it kind of goes with our episode, what about that green-red fairy we've been talking about? Is that a better description of if we had to nail it down?
Is there a green-red fairy?
There is not.
Is there?
This is for discourse purposes.
No, I want it, and is it fairy? I wanted it yesterday. Come on, Wizards of the Coast. We already have one. We already have it named. Give it to me.
And then we have our other host that doesn't necessarily co-sign on any guild or archetype.
I'm not looking to have a specific fairy in a color pair, but Demir,
that's what I was going to ask you. That's kind of a follow-up question. May, if you had to enlist in a particular group on the plane of Ravnica, which guild would you sign up for? Is it?
Well, actually, it's really hard for me to turn down Simic.
Simic? I'm definitely Team Gruul, man. I gotta imagine like the buffet at the Gruul house is a little insane.
Simic is my culture.
How about yourself, Stu? Demir? Yeah. Demir locked in hard? Spies?
It's gotta be, right? It's where all
espionage.
It's where all the broken things and the ability to get the broken things lives. So count me in.
If you're wondering what we're going to talk about today, so just like any other writer or podcaster or content creator, I think Emma Partho actually wrote a nice article about this. I have experienced writer's block. It's to the point where, I've reached out to Stu and to May and I said, hey, I just can't think of anything else. Like, 80 plus episodes deep into this idea. Like after a while, you're like, I can't write any more Stephen King novels about the attack of the lamps and all the things, right? And you always got to wonder, where do these inspiration keep coming from? And I said to myself, why am I struggling this hard? We've got this Facebook group that has 800 people in it as of today's recording. And one of our good friends, Jimmy McCain, happened to respond to a question. I said, hey, hope you guys are enjoying the podcast. Was there any topics that you would love to hear myself, Stu, and May talk about? And Jimmy chimed in immediately. And here was the idea. He said, unconventional archetypes and color breaks. An idea of mine would be to talk about undersupported, unconventional archetypes that bend the color pie, or at least maybe your previous conceptions of it. For example, Rakdos, Spellslinger, signpost stuff would be like Dreadhorde Arcanist, Sedgemoor Witch, Magar of the Magic Strings, and Judith from the new MKM.
The new Judith.
The new Judith.
A better Judith.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty sick. So I'm like, you know what? I can write this. We can do this. So I think this is going to be an interesting episode where we kind of dive into some of the unusual crafty deck building styles / cube building styles that myself, May, and Stu's currently working on with Doom Cube.
That's right.
Coming.
You know what? I think there's the release is like there's going to be a director's cut release. So
it's like it's Zack Snyder's version of Cube.
Yeah, it's being edited right now, and the editors are just taking forever.
All right. Before we go any further down this path, we're going to do the thing that we always do here at UberCube, and we're going to enjoy our libations of the show. And we're going to start out with May.
Hi, that's me. I am drinking water with electrolytes because I am very snotty and gross today.
I feel that life. I'm just getting over that myself, but I'm at the end of it. So now I'm enjoying a Voodoo Ranger Juice Force IPA. Anthony.
I am cootie free, so I'm having a Lagunitas IPA and a Pale Ale.
Good.
Let's go.
All right, crank 'em.
All right.
So let's give a shout out to our good friends over at Lucky Paper Radio. They did an episode that is kind of parallel to what we're going to talk about today, adjacent to this, on emergent cube design. We're going to put a link to it in our public show notes, which will be available when this recording is live. But basically based on what was discussed during Jimmy's contribution, Jimmy's paragraph that was spoke before by Anthony, and sort of a combination of this with, we'll mention what Ryan Sachs mentioned too, is that he has a process, right? Same way that you do. Same way, May, that you have a process when you're building a cube out. It's to take the archetype and then build the idea out from there. Now, Anthony, talk about the resource that you used for this process and how it sort of helped guide you along.
Our good friend Jimmy posted up and said, hey, can you help me out? I think it would be neat if we could design around like a Rakdos type of spell slinger. And that's what we're going to kind of deep dive down into. So I said to myself, what resource did I always use when I built my commander decks? After I built them by hand, and it was EDHREC.
Did you refer to yourself as self, or did you say self?
Uber
or did
Bear.
you say Uber Bear?
Uber Bear. Uber Bear. Yep. But using this type of, I guess, divergent process of thinking where we kind of broke off and kept going down the different rabbit holes of, hey, this card takes me to this card, and this card takes me to this card. I think I can make this archetype fire, and I can make it pop. May, do you have similar experience with just using a card to kind of be the linchpin or the signpost for you to design around?
Yeah, I've actually made an entire cube based around a similar concept of I just wanted to take a set of cards in each kind of guild combination and then just work my way into these weird directions for those guilds. And sometimes that's just where you need to start, is just kind of, what is my pillar of the design for this archetype? And then what kind of environment do I need to craft in order for this to be viable?
So before we actually start building this out, let's kind of talk about some of the cards that break the expectations or what you would expect this card to do. Like it's either outside of its color pie, or typically this creature doesn't do this or that, etc. And we joked about the red fairy or the is it fairy, where you just kind of doing something a little different that's never kind of, it's not expected. It takes a little bit of not only acumen, I guess, from your players to understand what you're trying to convey to them, but simultaneously you have to adapt to it. It's not like when you see this card, it's not necessarily signaling this and you're trying to take them down another path like breadcrumbs. Do you have any thoughts on that, May?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm not either.
Well, let's start out, right? So we'll start out with a card that we're going to put in this sort of, I don't want to say anti-signpost, right? But just leads players in a different direction. And this is Monastery Mentor, right? Very well-known card. Doesn't need a lot of introduction, but it's a 2 colorless, 1 white creature, human monk, 2/2, has prowess, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess onto the battlefield. This is a very, very, very powerful card, right? It's a 3-drop that is fairly, if not pretty aggressive. If you were to build a pretty standard mono-white aggro deck in a vintage cube, as an example, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of use for a card like this. Would you draft it? Yeah, I suppose you would, but there's better things to do through the first 3 or 4 turns than to put a Monastery Mentor into play, right? When you're drafting that mono-white strategy with creatures, you're playing a lot of creatures, and the payoff for Monastery Mentor is non-creature spells. So, and Anthony, you alluded to this before we actually started to record. What are essentially sort of the philosophical colors, in your opinion, for Monastery Mentor?
It's Is It all day. So this is Jeskai. Its right? Very nature of, it's a secret Jeskai card. I guess it's not really a secret, but
it's not a secret now.
It's not.
And that's literally has the eye on the emblem right there.
That's why we're not actually, that's why this card is a lot cleaner and not misunderstood to take you down that direction. When players see this in a vintage cube, they never, look at you and say, hey, you've set me up for a trap, or you've misled me as a drafter. No, they just fall into that and they go, Monastery Mentor. Well, I'm going to start doing like a Is It Spells Matters, and I'm going to splash Monastery Mentor in there.
And this
comfortably.
Let's be clear, this is not some, grand, like, wow.
No, there's no epiphany
this
here.
Is very low-hanging fruit, very, very obvious. This is just a signpost that you can extract when developing a list to say, here is a card that on the surface, okay, this is, in this instance, it's a white creature card, but when you really start to look at the possibilities when building out archetypes, now you can start to, quote unquote, break the pie a little bit.
Right. Very comfortably splinter off from this idea and start building it. But let's start kind of breaking in some unusual ones. And this is kind of still, I would call this the preamble portion of our episode where we're kind of building up to the crescendo right?
The waffle portion.
Exactly. That's what we're doing here.
Get your whipped cream out, guys. We got the waffles going.
May, would you mind taking on the next 2 and kind of explain what we're doing here for the divergent breakoff?
Sure. I particularly like that you highlighted 2 cards from Strixhaven in this particular segment. It's a list of 5 but I'm just going to cover the first 2. First is Sedgemoor Witch, which is 2 and a black, 3/2 menace. She has Ward, pay 3 life, which I already love, and it also comes with Magecraft, where essentially whenever you cast or copy, which is very relevant, an instant or sorcery, then you also get to create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token that when it dies, gain 1 life. I really love it because it really cements itself as the Strixhaven gimmick of everything is spell slinging, everywhere is spell slinging, even if it doesn't make sense. And making things that are traditionally in the Gruul part with the pests, or not Gruul, Golgari with the pests, and I just find that really cute. And speaking of Golgari, Dragon's Guard Elite is 1 green, human druid, 2/2. Magecraft again, which in green is extremely a color break, but whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on it, then you can pay 4 green to activate double the number of +1/+1 counters on this card.
So
that's just really
let's
fun
unpack
design.
these 2 real quick. So Sedgemoor Witch, when it first came out and it was released, a lot of cube curators, and that could be from thematic design to even like vintage power type of stuff, right? High powered cubes, saw this card as an opportunity to kind of emulate what Monastery Mentor had kind of done, right? It didn't really confuse your drafters. It just lets you kind of justify the splash, right? Like I was going to do Is It being my core spell slinger type of grouping, right? That guild that we want, May wants to join over on Ravnica. But now I can splash in Sedgemoor Witch and kind of move into a Grixis type of design. It opens up a lot more opportunity, and it allows kind of this natural progression of cross-pollination where you can start now branching off into how do I make this card bleed over? Because one thing that you don't want to do as a curator, or at least I'm going to say from my standpoint, is to make these linear type of, if I'm using the guilds, let's go back to Ravnica for a minute. And if I'm a set, then it's really cool that I keep them kind of straight edge so that everything falls in its place and has its unique type of stances and abilities and what it does. It's very clean to understand. But it's nice when you see a card like Sedgemoor that can kind of just jump over and now give you an opportunity as a designer to make a unique archetype kind of start to unfold, or a different grouping.
Yeah, and Sedgemoor Witch is aggressive, right? It's a 3/2 for 3, which is not bad. It has menace, so it attacks well. The pay 3 life for the ward, that's not to be scoffed at. We've talked previously on episodes, and I've mentioned that I love Ward much more than things like Hexproof and Shroud, which I think are very uninteractive kind of keywords, where I think Ward is just wonderful. And that ability is so relevant, right? You're now getting to flood the board with creatures. That's, in my opinion, a very Golgari thing to do. Huge shout out to my boy Slimefoot the Stowaway. Much love. And Dragon's Guard Elite, like, I think that's really cool as far as a green ability, right? You're getting to increase those counters, you're building a creature, you're getting it bigger and bigger and bigger. No trample or anything, which I kind of would have liked to have seen. But it
bleeds over. What's interesting about Dragon's Guard is now it gives you another bleed over point, right? So now you had this Is It spell slinger, we can say like turn and burn or whatever comes naturally to that idea, draw go type cards, tempo based decks even. Now Dragon's Guard gives you the opportunity as a cube designer to incorporate your proliferation and your, I guess, 1/1 counters matters into this like rug kind of build off. So now this card has given you an avenue to kind of go, say, to the right and start building out this whole new mechanic. You can design around these two and split 2 different directions off of that Is It as the base.
Doubling season's looking real nice with these 2 right now. That's all I'm saying.
So you can see where Stu just did, where you can it starts making your brain start going through what are the possibilities and how might I design from using this as a concept. May, you've done this type of break off where you keep splintering and going down this other path and splintering, and this is how you get a cube all of a sudden, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, I find it really important that when you're designing an environment, it's not just a matter of making the environment be able to support those kinds of cards that you're wanting to play, but also make it so that way they have enough bleed over that they will end up in lots of different decks. You want pieces to be contested over, and you want them to end up in different aspects of it rather than just this one specific one. So, for example, with Sedgemoor, Dragon's Guard Elite, I pulled up specifically the Golgari example, since Strixhaven's weird in that everything's spell slinging, right? But the fact that Dragon's Guard and Sedgemoor can end up in that Grixis, in that rug, etc., it matters a lot for that overlap. So,
do you think there's a color that you would say is a little bit more swayed towards the copying of spells?
Blue and red.
You think
red.
Blue, red?
Red likes to there's like swerve effects and copy effects.
Mine was going to be red.
Fork and stuff like that.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So red was going to be mine. So now we're going all the way back to the, the Rakdos Spellslinger. How incredible is this for you to just think, you know what, that's something that I want to, I want to bring in, right? I want to bring in those copy spells. They can be good in a red blue. They can be good in this red-black Spellslinger deck that I'm getting, right? So now you're starting to branch out from this archetype and to be able to, support or create new archetypes on the back of that.
Yeah, it's very like waypoint driven, where you put a pin here and then you start, well, there's a good idea, and you start putting another pin here, and you can keep doing this divergent breakoffs. Again, referencing the LPR episode. Fantastic episode. I'm going to keep coming back to it. It's a must listen. I thought it was great.
Link in the notes.
Yep, 100%. So let's kind of distill down to the core kind of question that Jimmy presented to us. And it was regarding a unique kind of archetype. He would really like for us to talk about something that was kind of breaking that color shifted color pie. And it was the Rakdos Spellslinger, right? We've alluded to that Strixhaven gave you some tools and these will be included in the show notes, but stuff like Leonin Light Scribe, which is, filling out that white side. And then we've also got Exodus or Reek Overlord, and it flips over to Awaken, the Blood Avatar. Lots of words, lots of text. Gonna save that. Gonna be in the show notes. But these cards all kind of play into that Magecraft ability. So it opened up all these interesting avenues, really driving home the Rakdos side that we're going to talk to and how you can link them.
So before we get into it, let's think of, let's create a new name for our deck, right? Spellslingers is a little generic. So are we creating just a Spellslingers deck, or are we being a little more focused?
Would you like Bloodslingers or something?
No, not Bloodslingers. But I like that you're being creative, but I'm thinking even a little more generic than that. Control. Just control. Sure. Let's start out from a creative perspective. We're not just trying to create Spellslingers, right? It's not just how many spells can we throw in there that are instants and sorceries that have the potential to be copied, right? Or cast, obviously. Let's think about a control deck. What do we want to do that is a good control shell? Maybe this is the back end of the cube that we're drafting, right? And maybe we don't really have a great blue-based control archetype, right? Maybe blue-white is more on our flyers, or more on, whatever blue likes to do, right? But we need something that we want to put in this cube that's a little shifted, and now we want to put a black-red controlling kind of archetype in the deck, and that's how we're going to focus our pinpointing the spells that we want to put in this cube.
I can see that, May.
To piggyback off of what Stu was saying, I'm actually surprised that we don't have Gurmag Angler in our notes here, because that's like the mainstay of Grixis or Rakdos type of burn control, however you want to put it, where it's just, I'm going to try to control the board, use all those spells, so that way I can make sure that eventually I can just toss all those spells to bring out a Gurmag.
I would prefer, if we didn't even just have Angler, if we maybe also had my boy Banana Man in there. Put some Tassica the Golden Fang. I mean, it's not remotely Rakdos, but, that's another card that's going to be part of this cube somewhere.
So let's take two pieces, and we're going to kind of break off. And this is where Jimmy had asked the question. It was in the original, how do I take Sedgemoor Witch, which we've talked about that card, and how do I take a card like Dreadhorde Arcanus and use these as signal signpost? And this is what I did with my whole EDH Rec magic and Scryfall magic, and started kind of working through it, going, yeah, I would totally run that. Dreadhorde Arcanist. For one colorless and one mountain, you get a creature zombie wizard. It's a 1/3. Trample. When Dreadhorde Arcanist attacks, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to Dreadhorde Arcanist power from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card will be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So it is snappy without being so snappy.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I love this card.
And repeatable.
It's repeatable. I run this in my Powered Vintage Cube. I run this in my Uber Bears Horror Cube.
Uber Bears Horror Cube?
Yeah,
not Self's.
Not Self's.
Horror
not
Cube.
today.
Uber
not
Bears
today,
Horror
Self.
Cube.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that I'll note about this card is that outside of trying to make it a dedicated signpost card for the, hey, this belongs in the deck that cares about spell slinging, it's also just generically a pretty good card if you have really efficient cards. Like, we all know the classic line of Bolt, Snap, Bolt. This is kind of a slower version of that within the same color, and it's not too much of a stretch to be like, well, hey, if I'm already doing Rakdos Burn stuff anyways, then it's not too far of a stretch to already have Dreadhorde Arcanist to do that line.
I agree. So how do we take these two cards, which obviously both of these can stand alone quite nicely, right? We've all agreed that these are generically, splashably powerful in their own rights, either one of them. You can choose them and put them in a lot of different types of cubes. They're not too strong. They're not too weak. They're kind of just right. These are, to me, these are both very elegant design cards.
They're beautifully designed cards. Absolutely.
They both don't really break anything. They just kind of do something really well and just enough to inspire your drafters to have a good time. And what if you had the aha moment? You've referenced these aha moments all the time, May. I think these two cards kind of inspire some ahas. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So how do you take this pair and diverge off and start building an archetype of it?
I want to see Inti. That's the first thing I want to see. Like, give me Inti and so Dreadhorde Champion. Or Dreadhorde Arcanist, sorry. And just let me fill the graveyard and then just start swinging and growing Dreadhorde Arcanist and then just casting a ton of spells out of my graveyard for free.
So
that's what I want. Can you make that happen for me today?
That's a wish, and I will put that on the list. And we'll just add that, and we'll see what we can do.
Perfect.
Well, Santa. May, would you mind taking this first card that just got released, the new Judith, please? Because I think this is just the perfect linchpin of what we're talking about today.
Oh, yeah, and she's gold. I mean, what? Judith Carnage Connoisseur is 3 black and a red for 3/4 legendary creature human shaman. Whenever you cast an instant or a sorcery spell, you may choose one. That spell gains death touch and lifelink, which, already love that. Or create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Card. What a mean card.
I love this card. So this is your spell slinger, but also you can see it goes into some interesting life gain type of archetype design that you could kind of spin off from this, right? Like a bad spin-off series. Or you could kind of latch on to that 2/2 red imp token that it makes. It does the 2 damage with the dice. That screams aristocrats, goblin bombardment.
It turns your lightning bolt into lightning helix, and that's huge.
Yep.
It's pretty sick, right? So you can see where you can, even though it costs 5 mana for a 3/4, this is like an engine that if you got it popping, you can start really defining where you can take these Sedgemoor witches and these arcanists and pull them together, right? And start signaling a signpost or signaling.
Wouldn't it be more of like
signaling an archetype?
Wouldn't it be more of a payoff? Whatever.
I don't know if it's a payoff or a signal. This is an interesting card. I guess it ultimately depends on your cube speed, right? Like, where do your turns lay out and how fast is your cube development? Would you agree with that? Like, if this is 5, is this a payoff or a payout? I don't know.
I think it's a little... Okay, here's why cards like this are a little awkward for me, is because... If I'm drafting, let's say I've got things like lightning bolts and fire bolts or whatever, and I'm trying to be a little controlly, where am I at by the time I've got 5 mana to cast Judith, right? Have I got the ability to refill my hand and be able to get the benefit from casting a bunch of instants and sorceries? Maybe if the cube's really on the slow side. Cards like these, I will say I prefer, and I suppose this is very, very obvious, I prefer my payoffs to be a little cheaper so I can get them out sooner. A 5 mana spell that you've got to sort of save some of those effects. Okay, if you've got a Dreadhorde Arcanist that's a 1/3, that's a little bit more difficult to kill. If you've got other cards that have got Defender or have got the ability to protect yourself before you can start getting your payoffs for these kind of spells, it's okay. But they're clunky, awkward, maybe.
Shows up a little too late for the party, I think, actually.
I think so.
But I was evaluating
Great commander. But let me just state this. I can see why Commander players would absolutely fall in love with a card like this, right? Because you've got 2 or 3 turns early on.
Yeah.
At least, unless you're like soul ringing and, hyper powering out a card like this. But once you've got something like this out, the value that you're going to generate in a 4-player game is going to can get out of hand very, very quickly. But I feel like in a 2-player game, this just is, I don't know, it may be a little slow. And maybe that's just me thinking of it.
Maybe live the dream.
Live the dream, 100% agree, right? But I think, I don't know, maybe it's just me thinking of the higher speed cubes
Yeah, I've had a hard time actually
you.
evaluating it too. I looked at it for the femme and ultimately stuck with the original Judith, right? That really has that aggro, light aristocrats built into it.
Which is also terrible. So I understand that too.
For that, it fit the tempo. And then in this case, I was also looking at it because she's metal as AF, right? I was looking at it for the Munson and I got to thinking it's just too late in the Munson. By the time this drops down, I don't know. I might test it. I'm going to find somewhere to test this card. I think it's an interesting card. It has a lot of applications and I think it can signal some really neat, even if you don't have like a Rakdos control or a Rakdos spells matters type of grouping, I think this card still can do something to kind of signal your drafters to have a little bit of fun, build around-ish, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So, May, would you mind, that kind of ties off Judith, and Judith is great, but we think it showed up a little late at the party. Now we've got a particular Minotaur that's all about the party. May?
Magar, the Magic Strings. It's 1 black-red for a legendary Minotaur performer, how appropriate for Rakdos. 3/3. You can pay 1 black-red to note the name of a target instant or sorcery in your graveyard. Put it onto the battlefield face down. It is now a 3/3 creature, with whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may create a copy of the card of the noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and if the creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This card is really cute. But I also just really like mana dumps. Pay 3, make it 3/3, that if it connects, play that spell. It's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of mana to get going.
I would have never put this on the list in any day until I've actually seen this and how it uniquely plays in a commander deck, believe it or not. I've got to see this live on the table, and at first I was like, oh my god, I can't believe somebody's playing an uncarded or a commander table. Like that is so cringe to me. But once I saw this card start doing the thing it does, it's really neat, and it does a lot of things. Like it turns your lightning bolts into a creature post the lightning bolts.
You're going to have to really embrace these cards.
It's wacky, and I don't particularly run a lot of, if any, in any of my cube environments, but I think this card is interesting and kind of does the Rakdos thing that we wanted to do here.
But listen, these uncards have a place. It's time for you to embrace Comet. It's time. I'm just saying, it's time for you to embrace Comet.
I don't like Comet at all. But we kind of, if you were looking for a signpost and I put Magar versus Judith, I think Magar actually does a little bit more of what I would want this particular strange archetype to do, because I think Judith showed up a little too late to the party. Magar starts getting there and grinding it out immediately, right? Like that kind of comes to that mana curve where Stu was wanting to use these lightning bolts and inquisitions and all these things to the control-y burn aspects suddenly get kind of, you don't really want to delay those for Judith to get the value. Magar is all about the value now, right? Like it's on tempo. Keep moving it forward. So if you're looking for a wacky way to tie in a Rakdos Spellslinger deck, I think Magar is interesting.
I think it's phenomenal. I want to hit you, him to Turak. Your turn.
Gross.
Hit you, him to Turak.
Okay, so we're not using Magar in any cube ever now.
I'm going to build a commander
ruined
deck.
Magar.
And
I would like to note that if you somehow manage to like discard Cruel Ultimatum or something, that's game breaking.
Yes, gross. So you can see where you can do that too. Actually, Cruel Ultimatum's not that far of a reach to do that with. So I think it's interesting if you're trying to tie that in. And so like I wanted to put like that's the 2 specific guild cards, and I one footnote that I wanted to put in here is we list these particular cards. You'll find that I put a lot of them that are specifically the Rakdos colors. And that can be kind of restricted from a draft perspective, or at least building out having too many gold cards, unless you're embracing the idea of a gold cube or something that can handle the mana base, it could be problematic. So as I go through this and build it out, I'm kind of the mindset I would be cherry picking certain cards from these that I'm listing if I wanted to build out this archetype. If I wanted to find like an interesting way to, I guess, incorporate a card into the Judith and Magar kind of concept that I'm designing, I thought Virtue of Courage was a cool card. For 3 colorless and red, you get an enchantment. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library. You may play those cards this turn. Or it has its, I guess, adventure side. Emrith Blaze for 1 colorless and 1 red. You get an instant adventure. Emrith Blaze deals 2 damage to any target. this card kind of plays into as another, I wouldn't call it a signpost, but I'd call it like another nice build around key component piece so that you could kind of have, as we were pre-gaming, May might want to incorporate Rakdos Burn into this idea. And if you've noticed with Stu's tone, he wants to go into the Rakdos control strip your hands type of tone. I think this Virtue of Courage is a nice little combination of these two ideas. Would you guys agree as far as a component to this
I would
build?
agree. I'm not always looking to strip everyone's hands. I'm looking for, can I do that? Then that's great. Can I get some hand information? Reference our previous episode. I'm interested in that too, right? Or can I, whatever I can do that I can get a little extra value from. I'm good for that.
You know the signpost that's underrepresented in our show notes here?
What's that?
So there is a variant of this that is Rakdos Storm, and it actually comes with Rowan, Scion of War, where I'm actually surprised that it wasn't on the list already, but it's 1 black-red, legendary creature, human wizard, 4/2 with menace, which, I already love that stat line. But you can tap her to make all the spells you cast this turn that are black and or red cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life that you lost this turn. But you can only tap it as a sorcery speed. So if you say Sign in Blood or whatever, now all of your things cost 2 less. And that is just asking for, Tendrils of Agony for that Storm card. You could just straight up make Rakdos Storm as a whole thing thanks to Rowan. And that's a really strong signpost for that.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I think that brings a good point. Kind of what we're talking about is you kind of do this. I've done this straight stacking. So think of a bunch of blocks or boxes stacked on each other, but then you can break off to the left and right and diverge from these ideas. And it's really easy to do when we've got those kind of center points to work with. Using Spells Matters is our base kind of work off point, but you can see where it ties off and cross-pollinates into other archetypes very cleanly, which kind of leads me to another interesting card that I want to talk about that's a little different here, but plays into this, and it's Obosh, the Prey Piercer. I hate this card, but it's interesting. I think it's a very live the dream type of card, but it really plays into what we're trying to do here for 3 colorless and hybrid Rakdos. That's what I'm going to call it now, coining that. I know that's not accurate. Legendary creature, Hellion Warrior, 3/5. As companion, your starting deck contains only cards with the odd converted mana cost and land cards. I think that's fascinating, and you can build an entire deck around this if you get it like pack 1, pick 1. If a source you control with an odd converted mana cost would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage and that to that permanent and or player instead. Lots of words, but it's so sick.
It is, and I'm immediately going to give a huge shout out to the companion text because going back to the Live the Dream Cube, I built a odd CMC deck in our good friend David McDarby's Live the Dream Cube, and I was able to cast. I'm pretty sure it's for free off the top of the deck, right? It was a reveal of the top card, and if it's odd CMC, cast it for free. And I got to cast 2 free Emrakul the Promised Ends. And so that, to me, not only is this now sort of breaking things off and you've got this like fun, like little sub game that you're almost playing with yourself, but you've just got this real cool build around card as well.
Yeah, so I think it's a neat, not exclusively signpost, but like a unique synergy card that ties into what we're trying to do here. So when we go back to the core principles using Lightning Bolt as the one side of the table for the Magecraft and all the things we're doing, it hits for 6 here, right? So that's pretty sick. May,
you like double bolt?
I do likes the double bolts. May, I would like to see your war face. You familiar with Full Metal Jacket? Show me your war face. But whilst reading this next card, like, show me your war face. See what you can do with this card.
Kill, maim, burn. 3 red, black for an instant to just choose 1 or more. Destroy target artifact, destroy target creature, and or kill, maim, burn, deals 3 damage to target player.
That was fun. So, like, this card cost 1 million mana. It's like 5 mana. But if you're doing something slower and more interesting, I thought this was a cool card. Plus, the name just was sick. And I mean,
1 for a bolt.
It gives you a lot of things you can choose. It says choose 1 or more. It says choose 1 or more.
1 or more.
You were
exactly.
doing a lot of work here. So you tossed in with a little bit of Obosh here, and you're doing some serious damage, right?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Hit them for 6, destroy their artifact they need, and their favorite creature that they just actually spent all this 7 mana on. Stu would be so happy after this.
We talked about cool names, right? How thematic and how wonderful. Like kill, burn, deals 3 damage. Name, destroy target creature. Kill, destroy target artifact. Like, it's so cool, man. I love cards like that.
Yeah, I think it's really fun.
Flavor, baby. We're about the flavor.
It is very flavorful. And as you can see, though, as I keep doing this, it was easy, almost too easy to keep saying, I know this doesn't fit necessarily cube curation, because at this point now Anthony says put in 15 Rakdos cards in my cube, right? So you have to, at a certain point as the curator, break off, but you can choose some of these cards to your 3s, 4s, 5s, and then kind of pick from them which one best fits what you're trying to do here.
Our point is to try to give you inspiration to what kind of exists within that spell.
Yeah, please don't copy paste this into a cube list.
Yeah, it's not a direct how-to. It's more of a here's a bunch of things that you can do within it.
I don't know. Just add Inti into the show notes next to Dreadlord Arcanist, and I'm down.
Yeah, same.
We are here for the inspiration. The next one I have, I also thought really filled out this was interesting, is Vial Smasher the Fierce. And this art, oh my god, I love this art. For 1 colorless and Rakdos, you get a legendary creature, Goblin Berserker, for a 2/3. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, Vial Smasher the Fierce deals damage equal to that converted mana cost to an opponent chosen at random. How random is it whenever it's 1v1? Not so random.
Not so random. Obviously, this is probably another card that for anyone who's a CEDH aficionado is going to be very, very well versed with this card. I don't really know if it still is as much, but I know for many, many years that Vial Smasher was like a CEDH Commander All-Star. But yeah, this is a super cool card. Again, when you've only got that one opponent, this was a Commander card, right? It was in the original, or it was in the Commander 16. It was when it was originally printed. So this is just a very, very, very strong card when you're playing in a 1v1 environment, especially like I've always thought, what about the split cards?
Oh yeah, I love them.
Right?
Yeah.
So now you've got the CMC of these combined. I don't know. I might have to call a judge. Like, does that? I would assume that it would count for both sides.
I have looked this up before, but I will ask Bones. But I think we got this one right.
Someone reach out to me on Twitter.
Combined,
and let me know.
But hey, Bones, we're gonna ask Bones.
All right, Bones.
Shout out to Bones.
Let me know.
This for us.
Let me know.
So Vial Smasher, while not necessarily a spell slinger following this, I just thought it had such a unique ability. It does just say cast your first spell. I mean, that's kind of just telling you to play Magic, but it does correlate to that, what we're trying to do here. In some cases, we get too specific with it when it says instant or sorcery, and the other one says non-creature. Well, Vial Smasher don't care about any of that.
No, it's just first spell.
Vial Smasher says play Magic.
And it's 3 mana. Like, it's quick to get out. You're getting the value from it early in the game, which is awesome.
So, May, I have a question for you. Since I've now admitted that it's not anything in description of what we've talked about, it's not really Spellslinger. Have I tricked you as a drafter now by adding this card, or is it just implied that this card does what, kind of the bolt? Does this card just kind of generically good, or am I tricking you as a drafter?
What?
Vial Smasher in particular.
No, it's just a good card.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it's just value on a stick, right? It's not nothing more than that.
Like when I look at this card, nothing about it screams signpost. It's just, hey, this is a good card.
Yeah, I agree. So, Stu, would you mind taking over this next guy?
So this one we're going to cover next is Torwaki the Younger. 3 colorless, 1 black, 1 red for a legendary creature, human archer, 3/3 with reach and lifelink. If another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus 1 to that permanent or player instead. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Torwaki the Younger deals 2 damage to any target. First of all, any target. Love that. Not target creature, not target player, any target. Love that. And
nice Planeswalker.
Yeah, great.
cool Planeswalker,
cool
bro.
Planeswalker. But yeah, and the non-combat damage, like this is just the scream Spellslinger. Right?
It
Regardless
does.
of what you're doing.
Still collapses for me based on that 5 mana again, right? But there is, again, my cube design brain starts humming, right? Like, not every cube has to be the most efficient cube. Let's just say that. Not everything has to be like the fastest cube in the world. And sometimes cards like this just give you that little bit of extra reach. Going back to our original question, would I run the Judith and all that? Maybe it doesn't give you the upfront promise that the card says on it, right? Like maybe turn 3s to 4, you've been taking some damage, or you've been promoting a lot of damage because your Rakdos deck is very aggressive. Sometimes all you need is that extra 2, 3, 4 damage to close the game. So maybe these aren't the haymakers that we're talking about. Maybe they're just kind of a component or the sum of the parts of the machine that you're building. And this is a nice little top to continue to get some value, repeated value.
I think you can plan for that as well. Like, not every cube has to have Night's Whisper where you're playing life. Not every cube has to have Dark Confidant where you're playing life, right? Sometimes you're just having to accept the fact that if your deck is slow, right? If you're introducing an archetype that is organically going to be slow because the value pieces, the real high payoff pieces, are in that higher CMC range, then you're going to have to potentially take a bit of damage in order to start getting that payoff. Sometimes that's okay. I think you need to really signpost that. Like, look, yes, this is something there's a bit of risk and reward here, but even though there's a bit of risk there, because you could potentially take a fair amount of damage, but the reward is pretty significant. I mean, this has lifelink as well, and I'm not going to poo-poo that, right? I'm not going to downplay the fact that lifelink, it's black-red, the ability to be able to gain some life back if you've drafted something slower, that can be very, very significant. And I would take a card like this pretty highly.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So far, I think that each one of these have their own little unique place. I'm going to grab each one of them. I'm going to grab 3 or 4 of these. I'm going to build a cube. Here's the next card, though. I actually put one on this list that's always been like this conundrum for me. I have stared at this card in a binder so many times trying to figure out where can I use this, because I want this card to work somewhere.
Anywhere.
I think this card's neat.
It's anywhere where you can play like Fiery Confluence.
There we go. Yep. Pestilent Spirit for 2 colorless and 1 black. You get a creature spirit, 3/2. Not flying, by the way, but Menace. Oh, gotta love me some Menace. And Death Touch. Instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. Whew, you could do some serious board wiping with this card. At least that's what I want this card to do, and I can't make it work.
3/2, Menace, Death Touch. That by itself is enough for me to be interested in this card. Like, that is serious value time, right? I'm hoping I can get some attacks in early on, and then when it maybe gets a little untenable, now I can just leave it back, and I've got a Death Touch blocker for your biggest creature.
Like, I would say that compared to a lot of the other cards that we mentioned outside of maybe Vial Smasher and the first 2 that we mentioned with Sedgemore and Dreadhorde Arcanist, I feel like that this is like one of the most well-costed cards for what you're getting. And when you're building a lot of, I would say, medium-powered cubes, Pestilent Spirit could slot right in for that kind of niche. Like, the issue with a lot of the cards that we've mentioned previously is that they kind of mostly slot into slower, lower-powered environments, but Pestilent Spirit can easily make its way up into the more medium-powered cubes. And I think that that's an important note.
So, at this point, I've driven home, yes, you could have, if you have a Rakdos card, you could make a thing happen, right? Now we're going to kind of do, like, in addition to the Pestilent Spirit, other cards that would very much support this Rakdos Spell Slinger control deck that we're designing. And one of them for me that I think is very interesting is Dualcaster Mage. For 1 colorless and red, you get a human wizard. Flash, whenever Dualcaster Mage enters the battlefield, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You may choose new targets for the copy for a 2/2. It's like a fork on a stick, sort of, kind of. I like it. I love this card.
Reverberate.
Oh, yeah, reverberate-ish. I love this card very much. Like, and I think it kind of gives you that spell slinger on a stick that you kind of want to do here. So I'm a huge fan of this card. I don't think it sees a lot of play in a lot of cubes, but I try to put this whenever. I always try to find a home for this card because I think it's such a interesting, like, that big story type of card, right? Where May casts this big spell and she's going to totally kill me. And I'm like, well, I'm going to respond to that. And you know what? You get Cruel Ultimatum and yours goes on the stack first and resolves. That is, oh my God. I've actually won Commander games with this where people are just like, you're dead. And I'm like, nope, you are dead. This card has so many memories for me.
I love Dualcaster Mage and Commander, but obviously Cube's a different beast, and it's definitely a pet card in this
It's 100% pet, but it's a clunky, but I love this card.
The one thing that I'll note about this card that I feel like is underrepresented is the fact that this is effectively an anti-counter spell, and I love that.
It is, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to counter your spell.
I'm counter your counter.
Nice counter, bro.
Nice counter, bro. So we're going to continue to build this Rakdos Spell Slinger. That's what we're doing here. And I found a card.
One thing that I'll note is that we've been talking a lot about the creatures aspect when we're talking about the Spell Slinger, and I feel like that is a disservice to talk, not to mention one of the most well-known Rakdos spells and Blightning.
Absolutely.
So Blightning is 1 black-red sorcery, deals 3 damage to target player, and that player discards 2 cards. Oh, what a good card.
I'll agree. Discarding cards, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it. I love it because I love making people discard cards, and I don't hate it whatsoever. So anything like that where I can, make my opponents like have to discard cards is a win for me. There's not really any point to this other than to say, if you're someone that really, really enjoys making your opponents miserable by discarding cards constantly, then shout out. You're like a kindred spirit.
What did Blightning cost, by the way, May? What was the casting cost on Blightning?
Oh, 1 black-red.
Not today. It's going to be just black-red because we're going to cast Blood Funnel first. For 1 colorless and 1 swamp or black, you get an enchantment. Non-creature spells you play cost 2 less to play. Whenever you play a non-creature spell, counter that spell unless you sacrifice a creature. That sounds really weird, but I have contemplated on ways that I could use like Sedgemoor Witch. You could see where you could sacrifice the pest, reduce your cost, gain some life, you can do some weird shenanigans. I know it's not ideal, but Blood Funnel is such a neat card for those that are willing to, those drafters that are the wild, every time you get I don't know about you, May, but when someone sits down at our draft table, you've got certain personality types, and Stu and I think are not these type. You got the come in there and they're just like, I'm just going to draft these cards because these are the best cards. I'm citing Kevin, our good friend. He's going to take the best of the best, creme de la creme. He's going to win that draft.
Some people...
I'm going to do some nutty stuff with Blood Funnel.
I generally, and I will say, this is to my own record disadvantage. I am always looking for the cute stuff. And every time I draft, I'm going to do something real cute on this cube, and I end up going 0 and 3 or
I'm
1
okay
and
with
2
it.
or whatever. But I don't mind as much because I'm typically trying to have fun and trying to build something that has some synergy rather than, okay, that's the most undercosted, most efficient creature. I'm just going to take all the green-black or the white-black or, whatever cards that are out there. This card
I'm the same way, Stu.
Yeah, this card is this is a complex build-around card.
Absolutely.
This is something that
This is your Johnny card.
It really is. I think that's a beautiful explanation of it. You must draft 3 cards, 24 cards, or whatever, that you're going to get the impact from being able to cast undercosted non-creature spells, but also be able to have enough creatures on the battlefield that when you put this down, and I don't want to put this down on turn 5 or turn 6, I want to put this down on maybe turn 3.
I want I
want to get it down quickly.
Young Peasy,
absolutely.
Sedgemoor Witch, you can just start doing some crazy
young
stuff here,
Pyromancer is just absurd in this instant, right?
Absolutely.
You cast it, you get the trigger on the stack. Okay, I'll create my little token, then I'll sack it to the Blood Funnel. Absolutely, it's perfect. But yeah, like I said, this is definitely, I may just covered that perfectly. It is such a Johnny card. But these are the kind of cards that I think in a cube, your players, there's going to be multiple players. If you've got a wide enough and a broad enough group that's drafting your cubes, there's going to be, or there should be, I'll say should be, I don't want to be elitist or exclusionary, but there's probably going to be a non-zero number of players that are going to see a card like this and think, that card is sick, I want to do a deck, I want to draft a deck where that just shines.
I'm that guy. It's this guy.
I'm that guy too. I love cards.
That's why I lose a lot. May?
Yeah, but you didn't even mention Bump in the Night.
Well, Bump of the I never.
Tusk
I don't think Bump of the Night's a playable card. I'm not gonna.
It is.
Is 100% not a playable Magic card.
It is a playable card.
A terrible Magic.
You're just
card.
wrong.
Okay. I looked at this card forever ago because I have the Horror Cube, and I was like, I'm not running that card. It's not a good card. It's not a good.
It's a good card.
It's not.
It is straight up Lava Spike with flashback. So to continue our note here, Bump in the Night is 1 black sorcery. Target opponent loses 3 life. It also has a flashback for 5 and a red. So I am saying that we need to mention it because Rakdos Burn is like a real archetype. That's a real thing, and this is a card that shows up in that archetype.
So this is, one person is a fan of this card, one person is not. May is making a case for this card. What is, just 2 sentences, make your case for this card.
If you would run Lava Spike, then I don't see a reason that you wouldn't also run Bump in the Night. That is my case.
Okay. Anthony's not a huge fan of this card. Anthony, make your case.
I evaluated this for my Horror Cube at one point because I kind of have this idea, and the flashback was the true appeal. It's ultimately the lack of modality. Going directly to face for 3 life simply didn't allow me to deal with any targets on the board that risked me any further than that. Like, you got a 6/6, me taking 3 life from you. This feels like the mono white version. What's it? The Healing Salve.
Healing Salve.
This reminds me of like anti-healing salve. We've split by that kind of margin. I just don't see this card being.
I think well, first of all, it's a common, right? It deserves to be a common. It's not a super powerful card.
Oh, yeah.
Could you look at it as, if you draft this card and you're drafting Rakdos, if game goes 6 turns or more, right? Assuming that both players play a land on each turn, target opponent starts the game with 14 life for 1 card.
It's okay.
Now evaluate it.
I can't. That's so weird.
But that's essentially what you're asking for, right? Because 1 black, target opponent loses 3 life.
Yeah, you're saying
it is
6, yeah.
never ever going to get countered, right?
Yeah.
If it can get countered, depending on the environment, for, if you get it out on the first turn. And then if you get sufficient pressure, then on turn 6, you get 3 more die. You get 3 more damage.
Okay. Let's take a game-ending Rakdos card in its place then, right? Because we definitely need to talk about Rakdos Burn.
I agree.
It needs to be mentioned. It's not just implied, it needs to be mentioned. It is a thing, it is an archetype.
I am 100% not cutting this because I think this deliberation actually matters. And for the listeners, you can see where it's interesting to see, like, you've got 2 different curators and we're kind of like doing this duel because it's fascinating, right? Because May has got the style and I've got the style, and you get to see this kind of happen live. It's cool. Keep going, May. What you got?
So, if we're not going to talk about Bump in the Night in the bottom end of, like, hey, I'm just looking for an extra lava spike in my colors, then how about Rakdos Return on the opposite side of the spectrum, where it's X black red, deals X damage to target opponent, then that player discards X cards. That is a backbreaking card. It either just wins the game or puts your opponent in such an unwinnable position in terms of their hand. That I would consider Rakdos Burn as like the big signpost, splashy, do the thing.
Yeah, and even compare that to something like a Mind Twist, right? Mind Twist is a broken card. So Rakdos' Return, it's not like it's 50 mana more or 3 or 4 mana more. It's slightly more expensive. It's a lot more manageable. I would agree. This is the kind of card that can be very backbreaking. And in an environment where you're looking at, again, go back to some of the archetypes that we've discussed, some of the enablers. If you have ways to copy a spell like that, a la Dualcaster Mage, I'm about it.
Or what if you had Krark the Thumbless? I know we've done creatures again. I came back. Sorry, May. May's like, we're not talking about burn, but I'm talking about some of these creatures that do this. But I couldn't, May. I'm sorry, not talk about Krark the Thumbless for one colorless, because he's got no thumbs. We got to talk about this, right? This guy, literally, he's got 8 fingers. He needs representation. So for 1 colorless and 1 red, you get a 2/2 Goblin Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or source spell, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return that spell to its owner's hand. But if you win, and you will win because you got a double-sided coin with 2 heads on it, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So now I want you to do Rakdos' Return. Oh my gosh. You're dead and you have no hand. It's awesome. So I think this card's fun and actually plays into, back to what May alluded to early in the episode when we were designing this weird wackadoodle Rakdos spell slinger thing. You actually talked about Storm. This card screams like I want to do some crazy, weird storm stuff, and I'm okay if it comes back to my hand because I want to do it again. So I'm going to do like a Thrill of Possibilities. And it didn't work out, I'm going to do it again. And you can see where this card kind of plays into this weird archetype. And we've reduced these things by doing Blood Funnel, so we eventually just sack that little Krark and get it out of there. We don't even want to deal with it. We need people with thumbs at this point, so we want to win the game. So I think it's interesting to kind of take all these and pull them together. May, I have a question for you. So Bump in the Night. I have an answer for you. I think Bump in the Night, we kind of went through that one, and I've got mixed feelings about it. I did evaluate that card at one point because I love me some flashbacks. It may get there. What do you think about Mizzix's Mastery to kind of tie off this episode as far as a card to close out like a Rakdos control spell slinger? What do you think about that card?
You can't have Mizzix in the title and try to suggest to me that this is Rakdos.
It's super Rakdos.
But Rakdos doesn't really care about like exiling and doing like this big explosive thing unless they already have a stacked pile of like removal to just effectively board wipe, which at that point, just run a board wipe. But it's cute. I think that you could use it like if you had a bunch of those miscellaneous lava spikes bump in the nights, etc., and then hit that Mizzix Max tree, it'd feel really good.
How about
and yes, that's
Cruel
the hill I'm going to
Ultimatum by
die on.
chance?
I think you're stretching things a little bit. Look, I love Mizzix's Mastery. I think it's a great card. It's not a Rakdos card. Take that for what you will. I just don't consider it a Rakdos card at all. I wouldn't put it in that category. But I think it's a very cool red card that gives you some agency over things that you've cast previously, the ability to be able to do something from your graveyard. It's a cool card, but it's not a Rakdos card.
I will add one last card for our Rakdos spells pile, because we need more instants and sources on this.
Yeah, we haven't really we're not making Magecraft happen. We're just talking about it a lot. Give us one.
Exactly, that's the issue. Kolgan's Command was a really popular one, where it's 1 black-red instant, choose 2, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, target player discards a card, destroy target artifact, and or deal 2 damage to any target. It just does so many things, it's super flexible, and that is the perfect round out of everything that Rakdos wants to be doing as spell slinging, this card does.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. You've got the discard, you've got the little burn effect, you've got the destroy artifact effect. Even the return a creature card is like super funky as well. Like I love Kolaghan's Command, great card. And yeah, I actually do think that perfectly ties off, because that is a card that if I can cast like 3 or 4 copies of that during a game, or even one copy of it, I'm a pretty happy bunny.
You're a happy boy.
I'm a happy boy.
So we're going to move over to final thoughts. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to thank Jimmy for breaking through that writer's block.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thanks, Jimmy, for helping me out in the writer's block. And that actually is a good little segue to, if you listen to UberCube, all one of you, right? Or dozens of us.
Both
and
of
you
you
like this and you want to talk about
That's
something.
not true. We've got literally
Dozens.
tens of listeners.
Tens. And if you really want us to talk about one of your topics, because, again, writer's block is real, right? The struggle of curation and designing. I'm building all these cubes and I'm writing about these cubes. May's doing the same thing. Stu's writing it. So if you have something you'd like for us to take on, feel free to, hit us up on our Discord, hit us up on our Gmail, our Twitter, which we'll talk about in our socials here soon. But it does provide inspiration. So Jimmy, this episode goes out to you. Thank you for your thoughts and for sending this over my way and giving me some inspiration. I had to stop myself from building this cube at a certain point. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to design this cube.
Anthony says that, and then next thing you know, it's going to be like, hey, look
I'm re-sleeving a cube right now.
Look at my 180 Spellslinger cube that I just built.
Be sick.
You guys want to play?
My Rakdos Spellslinger is going to be amazing. Thanks, Jimmy. May, do you have any final thoughts?
Nope, I've said everything.
Bump in the night. Let's go. All right, Stu, take us over to the socials.
All right. So, as always, I want to give a huge shout out from UberCube to our Patreons, Keaton, Lord Justice, Chris Singer, Nick LaPointe, Stephen Conifal, Preston, and Sam McKenna. Thank you to all of you guys for your ongoing support. It really means a lot, and I think maybe within the next 7 to 8 months, I might just get that mic stand that I've been really, really hoping for.
Shout out to Preston. Preston, thanks for helping us, brother.
Thank you. If you love the show, we would truly appreciate. Give us a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform. You can also use our affiliate link, ultasleeves.com/UberCube to get 5% off your purchase. You can also use our Inked Gaming affiliate link if you want to go and check them out for playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, all kind of custom products for your cube experience. As Anthony mentioned, you can reach out to us via Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod. If you've got a longer comment or you want to ask a question or even give us an idea for an episode, reach out to us via email, UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. You know the Discord. There's a few people joining now, so I really hope that it's getting a little easier to find.
Drop those ideas in there. Anthony has writer's block.
Drop those decks, the deck boasts, the pick one, pack ones. We're always happy to see it. And again, we thank all the Patreons, www.patreon.com/UberCube. Come check out. We got some pretty cool things going on there. And again, thank you to all of our Patrons for their ongoing support. Much love.
And other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is Happy cubing!
And I'm going to copy that for Rakdos. Happy cubing!